Okay, in this short video we're going to show how to configure our multiviewer to display 23 sources on 3 output screens. We've already decided that the layout will be 10 sources on the first screen, 9 sources on the second screen, and 4 sources on the third screen. So let's start. We create a new layout, and we can now save this as something like 23 video 10 9 4, just to remind us how we've configured this layout. Let's jump straight in, set up the first object. Because we're going to have 10 sources on this first screen, a 4x4 grid's quite appropriate. Let's size the object to the grid. Here we can see it's source 1, and our quick edit tile properties shows it's 480 by 270, which is perfect. Before we copy and paste to other tiles, we'll just set up some properties on this object so that we don't have to do it for every one. Moving down the tile properties, the first one's border. Let's set the border to 2. UMD, let's use the source name. Now we're interested in audio, so we'll have an audio meter on the left monitoring the first embedded pair, and an audio meter on the right hand side of the screen monitoring the second embedded pair. And let's just configure this tile to display alerts and messages. So alerts will show us a border if there's a problem. Let's save those changes. Before we move on, we'll just set up video source properties. So we can see we've already configured the first 2 stereo pairs to be monitored. Let's set up some alarms. We're going to be using a mixture of video images and test images, so let's enable freeze, audio loss, and audio over. And in each case we can see that the alarm will automatically clear after 10 seconds. Let's save those changes. Now we can update them to the multiviewer and just check that after a few seconds the meters and the alarms display correctly. Perfect. Now the advantage of doing this is we can copy this object to the remaining tile locations. So let's copy and paste. Note when you paste, it pastes over the existing tile. And I just drag this into position and it snaps to grid. So we'll do this for the remaining tiles that are this size. For the last 2 tiles we're going to use quarter resolution. So let's paste the object as normal and just change its properties. We can either use snap to grid and drag the object, or it's just as easy to edit the tile properties. So in this case it's going to be 960 pixels by 540 lines to match our 1080p output display. Now this tile is at the correct size. Let's copy this for the last object. Perfect. Finally, we should just change the source routing. So at the moment, source 1 is used for all of the source tiles. So we'll just go through and number those. Select the tile, check it has a red border around it to make sure that's the one you're editing. And then change, using the quick properties, we can easily change the source. So we'll be naming these from 1 through to 10. That looks good. Let's commit this to the multiviewer, and we should see our first screen spring into action. Let's move on to the second screen. For the second screen, we're going to use an array of 9 sources, so it makes sense to change to a 3x3 grid. We can copy the object from the clipboard and then change its properties to be the correct size. In this case, it's going to be 640 pixels by 360 lines. Just make sure you're editing the correct object. Great. And it snaps to grid. So let's use this, now it's the correct size, as the source for our other tiles. Super. Once again, we just need to change the sources to be the correct routing, to have the correct routing. In this case, we'll be going from 11 through to 19. That looks good. Let's commit it to the multiviewer and check our second screen springs into action. For our last screen, we're going to show 4 sources, so it makes sense to change back to a 4x4 grid. Let's paste the object from the clipboard, change its properties. In this case, it's going to be our 960 pixels by 540 lines. Now that this is the correct size, we can copy this object into our last three locations. Finally, let's change the sources, 20 to 23, and then when we send it to the multiviewer, our third screen now displays correctly. Finally, we just need to copy the alarm settings from our first source to all of the remaining sources. So this is easily done by selecting source 1, going into the selected video source properties, checking the correct alarms are enabled, and then we just copy them from source 1 to all of the remaining sources. Now when we commit these changes to the multiviewer, we should see after a few seconds alarms will appear on all the tiles. That's how easy it is to configure the multiviewer.